Hello, hello, and welcome. Thank you for joining us at the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. We are just getting started with our plenary session, um, and I will have Sean Gio from my team introduce uh, our moderator and kick off the conversation for today before we pass it over to Bill to have a wonderfully moderated conversation with our elected officials here in Connecticut. My name is Danielle Hubley. I manage advocacy and education with the Partnership for Strong Communities. Myself and Sean are here on the call today to support the session. So if you have any questions, need anything from us, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can place questions in the Q&A box that is a part of your panel at the bottom of your screen. So please engage our panelists with any questions that you may have by using that feature. And really quick, thank you to our sponsors today, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and Wells Fargo, and to our investor sponsors. And with that, I will kick it over to Sean to get the conversation started from there.
Thank you, Danielle. As Danielle said, I'm Sean Gio. I'm Policy Director with Partnership for Strong Communities, and we have an excellent plenary session for you today. We're going to hear directly from legislative leaders within the Connecticut General Assembly, and the conversation is going to be moderated by Bill Wells of Gallo Robinson Associates. This panel of housing champions will dig into key topics that shaped the 2025 policy landscape around housing, development services and supports, tenant protections, broader zoning reform, and more. We're just coming off of, I think, probably grueling for some of these folks, 2-day special session that, among other things, did focus on housing. So uh, I'm sure we'll get some insight into that and what was included in that bill, and now waiting for Governor Lamont's signature. So at that, I'm going to pass it off to Bill Wells.
Hey guys, good to see everybody. Bill Wells from Gallo Robinson. Very excited to have this panel here with me. If you guys are frequenters of the Affordable Housing Conference that Partnership so wonderfully puts on every year, you'll recognize a lot of these faces. I think actually the only new face this year is Martha, Senator Martha Marks from the New London area, because she was not named housing chair yet when we did this last year, but she had her first session and she worked hard. But as a round of quick introductions, we are very happy to have Representative Jason Rojas, Majority Leader of the House of Representatives, who literally has been championing housing bills as long as he's been in office and has done a very good job at putting some very ambitious pieces of legislation together. So it's nice to have him. We have State Representative Eleni Cavros-DeGraw, the Housing Chair for the Planning and Development Committee. We have State Representative Antonio Felipe, sorry, from Bridgeport, who is the housing chair. As I said, Senator Martha Marks is his co-chair in the Senate in housing, and we have Senator M.D. Rahman from the Manchester area, who's the Senate chair of the Planning and Development Committee. So you guys just came out of, and this is kind of really exciting because I think, besides the press, this is the first place where post 8002 passing, we get a real place to kind of deep dive with the folks who really put their all the work into this bill. And so I appreciate you guys hopping on after a long, grueling 2 days, and especially in the House where it felt like this thing took forever. But I wanted to start with Jason. And what I'm going to be asking all of you, and we'll kind of just go around on this since it's a pretty big bill. Almost, I think upwards of 50 sections, and there's a lot of policy pieces in it, a lot of it connected, some of it kind of individual pieces. But I wanted to ask, starting with you, Jason, how do you think this bill that you just passed in the House addresses the housing needs now and the housing needs in the future? And I guess what are your favorite kind of parts to what passed?
Yeah, no, thanks, Bill. I want to thank the partnership for hosting us and bringing all my great colleagues together to talk more housing because we're not quite done talking about it, even though, we accomplished a pretty significant achievement in getting this bill through the House and Senate again and over to the governor's office. There's still a lot more work to be done, and I don't want to scare everybody and say we're going to come back with something gigantic in February. Maybe that'll happen. Unlikely so, right? There is something to celebrate here, but know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And part of the challenge that I've had in housing in general, right? Because as we've talked to our colleagues, a lot of our colleagues asked us the same question: what's this bill going to do today? Right. And that's a harder question to answer when you're working on policy, particularly around housing policy, because as we all know, there's a long runway, right, to getting a housing project conceptualized, then getting it designed, and getting zoning, and then getting financing lined up, and then building it, right? And similarly, a bill like this really sets us up really strongly for the future, which I have long argued needed to be done 10 years ago. Where would we be today with addressing housing needs if we had actually been able to accomplish what we accomplished last week 10 years ago? So this really does set up our communities. It set up our COG. It sets up the state for, I think, a much more successful approach to getting more housing developed in the state of Connecticut. It probably comes up short on really addressing the needs of our most vulnerable residents, right? Those who are the most high housing cost burdened or extremely cost burdened, or who are dealing with housing insecurity or on the verge of homelessness, right? I don't know that there's enough that's in this bill that's going to address those particular needs, the needs that people have in this moment. But there are other avenues for us to address that, and usually that takes place on the appropriations side of the ledger. But how do we get more money into the hands of renters, right, who have RAP certificates, but the value of the RAP certificate today doesn't quite meet what the rents are out there in the marketplace? What do we do about homelessness services, right? How do we provide more funding to them? It seems every year we have this question as to whether we need to allocate more to cold shelters, right? It's winter every year, right? There should probably be a stronger commitment to ensuring there's funding in the budget to address those needs, knowing that winter is going to come every year. Then, of course, we're dealing with the unknown, right? It was just last week that was reported actions by HUD are going to impact renters in one way or another. There's still a lot of questions about what's going to happen with LIHEAP or SNAP, because they're all connected, and how we're going to respond to that, regardless of whether the government reopened, right? There's nothing to stop the Trump administration from engaging in the very same behaviors that they've been engaging in for the last 7 months, where they ignored congressionally directed spending. They impound resources, right? They just keep the money simply from going out, or they stop their leaders in their agencies from doing the job that they're actually legally directed to do. They're simply not doing it. So I think we have a very strong planning document. I think there are some things that are more immediate than perhaps I'm giving it credit for, but it really does. This is long overdue for us to really have a rational and strategic approach to developing housing. And, we can't underestimate how important it is to have towns and cities on board. We've been dealing with not having them on board in the way that we otherwise would like. And I think we now have an opportunity to be more thoughtful and strategic about collaboration and obviously execution on these important policies.
And then that Jason hitting all the kind of big points coming forward that everybody can see, which Jason's forward thinking on this is why he's been such a good champion of these issues. If I could just drill down before I pass it over to Senator Marks, if you had to kind of pick your marquee part of this bill, Jason, what do you think it would be?
God, well, it's hard to do just one, right?
I know.
What I was always remained committed to was ensuring that our communities and our state is thinking about housing for folks who are extremely cost burdened, who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum, because that is a private market failure. There is very few developers out there who are building that kind of housing. And this bill shows or re-shows right to the world that there should be a commitment on the part of government to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the most vulnerable, for which there is no private market solution. And that's really focusing on housing for the lowest income individuals, and also a reinvestment in our public housing authorities.
Thank you. Senator Marks, if I could repeat the same question, you've had a great journey in your first year as housing chair, and a big bill to celebrate. What was kind of that marquee thing that you think you were just very proud that got done?
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and thanks for having all of us, and to all my legislative friends who have worked many more years on all of this than I have. What I liked, one thing that really didn't get much press or many questions by the opposition, I'm not sure why, is the part with the building trades. Will be able to use their pension fund in order to work with developers to build affordable housing. It's for affordable housing. It will use the building trades and apprentices to build the housing. They've done it in quite a few other states, and it's something that, building trades came to Rep. Felipe and I this year, and I'm really proud that we got it in that bill so quickly, because I think that will maybe help with some of the urgency that we have for the lower socioeconomic residents in Connecticut. Those are the people that I care for every day in their homes. I think some people have a lot of bias about who these people are and what their lives are about. I have the privilege of sitting with them for anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half, and depending on what their skilled nursing needs are. And I really, I learn a lot about them. It is a true privilege, and some days I don't know how they wake up and make it through every single day. So those are the people that I truly want to help. The other part that I really loved is the first time housing accounts that Senator Miller and the representative of banking is, I didn't hear you, Jason.
Representative
Jason Doucette.
Doucette.
Yeah, Rep. Doucette. They got that through, which, we all know that it's really hard to get that first down payment. So it's kind of like putting money into your HSA. It's pre-tax dollars. Your employer can match that fund. And let's hope that it gets off, and that, we'll have to do a really good public campaign about it so that people know about it. And it makes a big difference not having to pay taxes on $5,000. So that's another part I'm excited about.
Definitely a great thing to highlight. Going back over to the House with Representative Cavaros-DeGraw. What about you? What was kind of the thing that you were very excited about?
I think my two things would be the somewhat controversial parking section. I think that was really important. When we had originally passed it back in the spring, it was actually the most forward-thinking parking legislation east of the Mississippi, so we were very excited about that. And I would also say that the obviously work, live, ride. I've worked 3 years on that bill. It's been through a lot of iterations, but we know that transit-oriented development is something that a lot of our communities are really excited about. A lot of our transit-adjacent communities are excited about. So my hope is that when we're increasing that density, that will, it's got so many benefits in terms of, not having to have a car, right? Not having to have the expense of a car, so that we are always thinking about how are we lowering people's expenses, and that certainly is one of the ways. But also the environmental factors around that as well. I mean, certainly we want less cars on the road if we can, because we want to improve our environment as much as we can, and people are really looking for those livable, walkable communities, and that's what TOD can really give us. And my hope is that as we move forward, we have some more good discussions. It's unfortunate that our Republican colleagues are not joining us today, because we certainly want to hear some of their comments as we move into future bills. And I think that it's important to note that in other states, it's the Republicans that are really getting all of the housing done. We just came from Town and saw so much of that there about how far forward they are moving. But I did want to say to my wonderful majority leader, because I felt like we are underselling this bill a little bit. I happened to share the link with one of our colleagues in New Jersey, and as you probably all know, New Jersey actually has fair share, and they thought it was absolutely extraordinary what we were able to accomplish in this bill, and they said they wish they could get half of what we were able to accomplish in this bill. So sometimes we need that outside perspective to reignite our excitement about what all we've done. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I think it's hard to pick just a couple sections, because I think we did such a good job on this overall. And I'm glad so many people were a part of the process.
And Elaine, since we're on subject of you brought up the two that I would say probably the two biggest talking points, at least on the bill, were the parking and the the TOD, right? Work, live, ride. If you could kind of summarize for our audience, what is the kind of main difference between 5002 and 8002 when it came to those two sections?
So the parking section, the big change was originally we said 24 units and under, you would not have to have a parking mandate, but now we're saying 16 and under. And I also think it's really important for people to know that the developers are the way that we've structured the new version of the bill, they will most likely engage in a study. So they can have an ongoing conversation with the town. And Jason, feel free to pop in here if you want to correct or add to. I think it's important that that ongoing conversation is happening with the town, because there still is in place the ability to make sure there are public safety considerations and public health considerations, environmental considerations. And the other piece of this is the town can now set aside 2 separate sections that could be 4% in terms of like a traffic district. So if they say, you know what, we get it, we don't need to have more than 1 parking place for, 1 bedroom. But in this part of town, we really do need more parking because maybe there's more commercial there, or maybe there's just a reason why they need more parking. So I think that there's a flexibility in so many pieces of the bill. And this is one of those ways that the town can really have a flexible conversation still with developers while also meeting the needs and hopefully reducing parking as, one of the highest expenses of development. And then in terms of TOD, there weren't a lot of huge changes. I was kind of excited because the larger group got excited about the wastewater study and the housing council. And so those were actually pulled out of the work, live, ride bill and put into the larger bill to have a greater influence in terms of, or I should say, maybe not influence, but impact in terms of the entire bill. So those were big changes. And then I'm trying to remember, I think we did put commercial on first floor of middle housing, right? I see Jason nodding. So I think that was the other big change. But for the most part, considering, I think we had another 13, 14-hour hearing. Senator Rahman remembers again this year on work, live, ride. That was probably one of the least changed parts of the bill. And we worked so hard on that I'm grateful that we were able to maintain it in the majority of the way that it is. And I would say one of my favorite pieces of that is the affordable housing as of right on religious property within the transit-oriented district, because we have a lot of religious properties that would like to be developed into affordable housing, and now they can do it inside a transit district.
Yeah, and one quick note on the commercial piece, right? Because it's something we've heard a lot of fears about. We all know what's happening within the commercial kind of property environment. So one of the requests we made was to simply clarify that mixed use would be allowable and that it wouldn't just be residential. And we think that's going to be attractive to a lot of developers, right, who are able to diversify the investment that they're making in their property. But there's also this notion that suddenly everyone with any property owner with a revenue generating business or entity or building on it is suddenly going to come in and tear it down to build 9 units of housing, right? That's just not rational or logical. So I think those fears are, while I appreciate them, are largely unfounded. What I do think this will do is really encourage developers who are sitting on underutilized or even blighted properties, right, to think a little bit differently about that property, or perhaps spark a new investment opportunity for them, which I think is in the best interest of obviously the property owner, but certainly the communities in which those properties are located too.
Thank you. Senator MD, what about you? You had to bring this bill out twice now. Yeah, parts of this that you had to work on the floor. What do you see as the biggest thing that was I guess we could, even though this bill just passed, if there was another item in planning and development related to housing too, feel free to talk about that as well. But whatever kind of was that hot button issue for you that you're glad got done.
Well, listen, we all know that, behind this big bill, main architects, 2 architects are, we have 2 majority leaders, right? Day, night, 24/7, they work behind this bill. And Jason explained really well about the bill. But I'm really grateful. We should celebrate at least after 8-day strategy 36 years ago passes. Since then, this is the biggest bill ever. After 36 years, we passed, this week, last week. So this is celebration time, but more work to do. Obviously, there's a lot in this bill. Like my co-chair, Commissioner mentioned, the last 3 years, work, live, ride, we work hard. But I'm happy, but also I'm disappointed few areas like fair share housing, some other item we could do, some other stuff there. But overall, we are moving right direction. Few things done this, obviously, hostile architects. This will help the homelessness population a little bit. Also, pilot program for shower trucks that will help because of cold weather coming now. This is all I'm also happy. That one, healthy home fund, that's also will help immediate. So a few things we did, but there's like I said, more work to do. But this bill overall will create more housing in the supply, rental issues, all those. We could do a little more for homelessness population, is funding for take care of the situation, especially cold weather coming this year, almost here, and also rental assistance. But this bill also, I think, helping the rental assistance through their towns if they want, and nonprofit they can use those things. So overall, I am happy, but some area, like I said, the fair share housing, some other stuff. But we are moving right direction after 36 years. This is why leadership matter, representation matter, because we have a right leadership. This is why after 36 years, we passes this big ass bill. Thank you.
And now, last but certainly not least, because Antonio, I think you were probably on your feet the longest on the House debate. After listening to a long debate and defending a very long bill and doing a very good job, I have to say, it's always I've known Rep. Felipe since since he walked in the building, and he's been he's a good colleague and a good friend, and it's very fun to watch somebody not once but now twice bring the large bill out and do a really good job explaining what the bill actually does and does not do. But he did a stellar job, and it was very exciting to watch. But what was the piece that you were most excited about after all that labor intensive work?
Bill, first of all, thank you. First thing I did when I walked into the chamber both times was put my chair in the back because I didn't need it, right? I knew we were in for a little bit, but I knew it was important to get to what we got to. And you look at 100 pages, over 50 sections, and you can say, and I will say, we did a lot. But there is so much more that meat on that bone, as Jason was getting to, so much more housing that needs to be addressed. The homelessness issues, right? I came from a legislative breakfast this morning, and I walk into my house and I start to feel my fingers, right? That little sting, that little feel of warmth, and it made me think of the fact that is a focus that I want us to take into this next section. But I think something that is important from this bill, and I'm going to be the cop out, right? And I'm going to talk about the stuff the bill was the 8002 was named after, was the housing growth plans and the housing growth fund. I think first of all, the housing growth plans, we kind of moved a little bit away from making it about affordable housing plans and making it to plan for all types of housing. But I think that's important, right? Because we have a little bit of a bottleneck in the lower parts of the market. We're not building enough middle housing, so there's folks that are constraining those more affordable places and making it harder for folks to get in there. It also makes it easier to build affordable when we have a plan. When you have a plan and you can tell us the reason, I can look at the Eastons of the world, Trumbull, New Canaan, and they can tell us, here are the things that we are really struggling with in trying to build affordable housing. And as leaders in the legislature, we can try to make those things easier. And representing a place like Bridgeport, where we have 50% non-taxable property here. And a lot of the properties that we do have that are taxable are given tax breaks because we are providing a lot of the affordable and the subsidized housing. We are not able to grow our grant list. We're not able to give tax relief municipally for residents. And to be helped with the burden of affordable housing and not have to build it in our cities, not have to kind of be the nucleus to the extent that we are, it would only be helpful for residents in terms of their own daily lives and making sure we're lowering mill rates, making sure people are paying less in the dreaded car tax. But with that, right, with doing these plans comes your ability to then take part in this housing growth fund. And I think that is a super, super cool and novel idea. It's adding more money, sort of like a community investment fund, to make sure that these municipalities have the opportunity to build. And we can give them a little bit of money to do that. I will be honest with you, $50 million isn't going to break the bank, right? And it's not going to solve this housing crisis, but it starts in a really, really good place. And it gives people the opportunity to just take these plans, enact them, and start putting affordable housing in places where we wouldn't have thought it would be. Because I will tell you, it's not just because these neighborhoods don't want affordable housing. I've been surprised many, many times over the last couple of years by folks who are like, we're building affordable housing in Easton, we're building affordable housing in Reading, we're in places that you wouldn't think. But they just need a little bit of help. And this hopefully will give them the financial incentive and us the opportunity to look at their reasons and figure out how to make sure they're less constrained. Because it's not all excuses, but we want to weed through those and get to the heart of people's issues in their community.
Yeah, I've been hearing about affordable housing developments in Somers, Connecticut. I'm an east of the river guy, and I live in the second congressional district. And to hear Somers talking about building housing is an exciting and different thing. And I know, and allowing for different types, right? Because as Kathy Austin always says, affordable housing has to look different everywhere, right? And she has housing developments that maybe don't look too big in Manchester, but for Sprague is a big deal, and adjusting for that is really important, and definitely a reflection of all of your work. I am going to reverse the questions, and I'm gonna go start with Antonio so he can get first grab of the next one when we talk about the going forward piece. But before we do the going forward piece, I do want to kick it back to Representative Rojas as our esteemed leader of the House on this bill. A lot of things. The bill changed a little bit, right? Like as Eleni talked about, some of the pieces that changed a little bit, but I think probably the dynamic that changed probably more was the governor came along differently this time, and you guys held a press conference with a very diverse group of leaders from CCM. What do you think, Jason, was kind of the magic sauce the second time to kind of make that fall into place a little better?
Yeah, I mean, certainly leadership by the governor, right? I mean, he said that he was going to get mayors and first selectmen on board. I don't want to speak for all of us on the screen. A lot of them was like, all right, yeah, good luck with that one, right? But he did it, right, and he deserves credit for that. He's taken some heat for it and certainly some criticism for it, but he stuck to it, right? And he brought folks to the table. And at the end of the day, we can pass all the bills in the world that we want, right? But unless they're going to be implemented in the way that we hope they will be, you need partners on board with that, right? And I think the changes that were made reflected what our local leaders wanted to see or needed to see, or would give them greater comfort in being able to implement it and actually meet the goals. And I think that's what changed, right? I mean, I remember there were some folks who were like, well, the bill's it's not as strong as it was in June. Well, yeah, it got vetoed, right? So I don't know that anybody was expecting the bill to be more assertive or more aggressive or to reflect the approach the five of us would take on a bill like that. So yeah, it was moderated down, but I think it was more that it was just watered down more than there were some parameters put in place that provided comfort to our towns and cities that they would be able to work with the policies that were enacted. And I think that resulted in, pretty unprecedented, right? Having a CCM and cost and the COGS all on board, right? At one press conference. That is something that should not be overlooked, and I think it presents a model for how we should approach this in the future. And I will think the big success of us as a legislature being more aggressive on this is that it forced the conversation and brought people to the table. And I think the end result of forcing that has been a bill that I think is going to do a lot of good for the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. And looking in the chat, and thanks, Antonio, for responding directly in the chat. That's fantastic. And I know we're so hot on the special session that just happened, and the thing that it's not overlooked, it's the state has had a strong commitment to building housing in the bonding package every single year you guys pass it. And a lot of that largely is thanks to Jason's leadership, but also thanks to everybody on this call for supporting it and talking about why it's important. So there's a lot of, you're gonna have a question on this, Jason?
Yeah, I just want to, one, Senator Duff's not here, and two,
Yep. Yes.
I appreciate all the accolades and everybody wants to make me a hero, right? This does not happen without Senator Duff, without the other four people on this screen, without Representative Luxembourg and Representative Roberts and Sims, who did a lot of the legwork early on in the session that we've all quickly moved on from, and the governor's office and Matt Brockman and the staff in both the House and Senate Democrats' offices. So, I appreciate, the love that I'm being shown, but I'm simply one vehicle, and none of this is getting done without a huge effort from a lot of people. So I just wanted to point that out, and also because I'm getting uncomfortable with how much love you're showing to me. So thank you.
Cast of thousands. I mean, when the bigger the bill, the more hands on it. But in the bond package, back, speaking of the larger audience, like the governor, right? The governor Lamont has come a long way in bonding. When we started out, there was a little bit of a debt diet, and it was hard to kind of move some things forward. He was worried about we were putting too much on the state's credit card. But he's always, he has since made a strong commitment to bonding for housing. And so the thing that kind of is not as attractive, and I guess is not out there in the space all the time, is just how much state investment does go into this stuff to make this stuff work. And so I just wanted to point out that Antonio did put that in the chat, and folks should check out the bonding package if they want to see the numbers. Yes, Jason.
I'm being polite and raising my hand. Yes, I just want to make the point. Yes, we have been committing a lot of money, but when you think about what the outcomes of that are, and there are good outcomes, as we saw a couple weeks ago when 8,000 of the 12,000 units that had state funding were simply for rehab and not actually producing new units, we should raise some questions about whether we're making those dollars go as far as we can. And that's why I think some of the other important reforms that were included in the bill, like Eleni alluded to with parking or commercial, right? Those are the kind of things that are going to allow us to leverage those dollars more efficiently and get more out at the end. So great to have all the money in place, but we need more units, period. And rehabs are important without a doubt. But I had to make that note. I'll stop interrupting. Thank you.
Absolutely. So now with and a thank you to Governor Lamont for actually signaling his signature. He put that statement out almost immediately that he intends to sign, which was welcome news for I think everybody's collective ears this time. Now going in reverse, I'm going to start with Antonio. The bill is big. You worked hard on it. The work's not over. What is something that you think that needs to be addressed either in this upcoming short session or in the longer biennium? What is the thing you're most looking forward to working on next?
That's the toughest question of them all, I would say. There's so many things that we've been working on for the last couple of years that I think are important. I think it's important to look at renters and figure out how we can give them more relief, whether they are folks who have vouchers or not, folks who may just be on that last rung. When we deal with homelessness, right? The problem that I have with 211 and the system we have in place is that you have to be homeless in order to access a lot of these services. So if you're right on that last cusp, right, where you just need a little bit of help to get over the edge or to make sure that you're keeping your family housed until you are officially homeless, you do not have access to a lot of these services. And I think of these families, we talk about the face of homelessness changing. The face of homelessness now could be two parents with full-time jobs sleeping in the car with their kids. And I know like City of Bridgeport, for example, will give out first and last month to families who really need to get back on their feet. But I don't think it costs that much if you need to just bridge the gap for a month for a family that needs to stay in their home. And that stops them from having to spend all the money on gas, have to buy new car batteries because they're using car heat to keep themselves warm during the winter, having to spend all this money on maybe a hotel, motel room, eating out. All of that puts extra constraint on a family budget. And what are we doing to make sure that we are getting to these folks while they are hitting that wall before they hit it? So I think for me, it's looking at homeless response, making sure we're putting more money in the system as it exists, but making sure that we're proactive in catching families before they fall, because the best way to address homelessness is to keep people in their homes.
I'll adjust the order a little bit because I'll keep it kind of on the housing committee side first, and then we'll switch to the P&D side. So I'll actually go to Senator Marks. Anything to add from on something you're looking forward to championing in the housing committee in the next session or even in the biennium that needs to get done?
Well, yeah. So in southeastern Connecticut, we have Alpha Properties has been buying up just in the last couple months, has been buying up so many of our affordable housing units. They're affordable, but they're not deeded affordable. So this new landlord is, handing out eviction notices. And these are people working hard, or seniors that, are I've moved into this one in Niantic, and it's funny, East Lyme, Connecticut, right? I mean, if I had said anything about just cause eviction to the Democratic, to the DTC in East Lyme a year ago, they probably would have freaked out and, said, oh my God, like we can't do anything like that. But now they quickly did a fair rent commission, and the tenants, they're unionized, and all of the tenants are unionizing, which, I'm a very big labor person. And unfortunately, the tenant unions don't have the same kind of rights, which they probably won't get. They're not part of the NLRB. But, Antonio, he turned off his camera because he's probably like has daggers staring me in the face. But I want to try just cause eviction again. It's just, all right, here he comes back.
I was getting juice. I totally want to do just cause eviction again.
Okay, good. I really, really, I see how important it is to people here. And we also have to get the word out more for people, because this isn't going to be the end of it for these private equity coming and buying up our apartments. That 62 and older and the disabled already have just cause eviction. They just don't understand it. And I'm so grateful to our advocates and not-for-profits that work so hard to help them. So that's definitely, along with what Antonio said about homelessness, it's one of the reasons I became a senator, right? Is because I see it every day, and it's so frustrating to see this public policy that really works and works awesome. And then there's public policy that needs a little bit of help. And I asked for this committee. Not sure why, but it's been amazing. And I'm hoping I'm chair of housing for a while, co-chair of housing for quite a while. So yeah, it's taking care of the tenants and getting more money for wraparound services. I don't think we didn't pass that law about the wrap, right, Antonio, where if there was just like one thing wrong with the house, like the burner, with the inspection, and then those wrap people applying for that wrap house, they can't get that apartment because there's just like one burner not working, or one little thing, and then somebody else gets that apartment. And that's just, we have to get rid of some of that regulation, because believe me, they will be just fine with the 3 burners, or, it eventually gets fixed, but not to lose their chance of getting that apartment. So that's something I want to work on again. One other thing in 5002 that we didn't get, that I don't know if we ever will, is when the municipalities take the developers for 830G to court, and then if it loses, because they do that a lot just to stall, right? They use parking a lot to stall, they use sewers a lot to stall. And so when the municipality knows they're not going to win this, but they're trying to stall even longer, and they take them to court, if they lose, then the municipality has to pay those legal fees. That did not get passed. That was the first thing that was taken out of the bill by the governor. So I doubt we're going to get very far for that. But I will keep trying, because that's just, I'm unapologetic about the things that I think are really important. And I'll just keep asking and asking. So those are just a couple things. I'm sure there'll be lots more on our desk soon.
Thank you for keeping the housing committee busy, both of you. It's and busy and for the good reasons. Senator MD, passing over to you. Let's get into the more planning and zoning side. What's something that you're looking forward to working on, either in the short session or maybe something even longer in the long session if it needed?
Well, I wish, we always talking about the biggest problem is the local control, right? As a planning and zoning, all those. I wish we remove more red tapes. That's going to make easier developer, builder, converter, whoever create more housing. We need to create, obviously, increase the supply. And I'm agree with Antonio, what he said, the homelessness, and if we are not helping rental, then it's going to lead to homeless, and then biggest problem. So I think we need to more invest helping the tenant. tenant rights or rental assistance more, funding there, and creating more, increase the supply. But important thing is I see there doesn't matter what we try to do, what area you want to creating the housing. If it's a local control, is not breaking, is going to be continuing going to be problem, supply issues. So next session, I think we should focus on more, remove more red tapes. That's going to help us to build more housing, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Calvert-Degraw.
Thanks. No, I hear what my good co-chair is saying, and I think that we do have to look at trying to cut more red tape because sometimes we make the processes so onerous that that is part of what is affecting supply. I think we did some of that in this bill, but I think we have, a further way to go. I also think that, I was bummed out that commercial ADUs got taken out of the bill. I would love to see those come back. I think there's a lot of people who are interested in, different little cottage sort of things that I think that would be a good thing to go back at. Since we now have affordable housing on religious property in a TOD, I think we need to look at that being the same way as of right or summary review for affordable housing and religious on religious property for the rest of the state, frankly. I have conversations quite a bit with religious organizations that are saying, we have a rectory or we have a convent or we have, this property or whatever it might be. You may recall we've had the tiny shelter bill the last couple years. I've had more interest in that bill in the last 6 months than the entire time. I think we need to work on that a little bit. There's some building code issues, certainly, and they are not a permanent solution to homelessness. We really need to make sure that we are increasing the ability for people to have that transitional housing so that we can move forward on that. That's more of a housing committee thing, so I don't want to step on the good housing chair's toes. But I think they would be in agreement that, that's part of the challenge. Our homeless shelters are full because there's no place for people to transition to, because those spots are full as well. So, and with a 45% increase in homelessness in a year, that is incredibly drastic. And then, as I think the majority leader alluded to, the numbers coming out of HUD for permanent supportive housing, cutting 70% of the dollars that go towards that, we are really looking at some very difficult situations. I would also say, in terms of making sure, I'm the co-chair of the subcommittee on appropriations for conservation and development. Department of Housing falls under there. So ensuring that the money is going where it needs to go, when it needs to go there. I think that that's a priority also for next session, is having ongoing conversations with the appropriations chairs about RAPs and many other things that fall under that. So I think, we've got to, within the concept of local control, I think we proved with this bill that there are ways to still have decisions made at the local level while also expanding the possibilities of what those decisions are. A couple years ago, I actually had a housing growth menu bill, which is where I think the title ended up sort of coming from, that was saying, you've got to do something. You have to build. We'll let you decide whatever it is, but you can't not commit to building once we give you all of the carrots that you need, which is why I'm really excited about that wastewater study, because then we can say, okay, we see what you need. We can put more bonding into sewer if that's what you need, but then that takes another excuse away from building what needs to be built.
Representative Rojas, what about you?
In terms of big goals for the next session, whatever.
Yeah,
what all my
or
colleagues just said.
you kind of mentioned that, this was a big bill, and maybe the short session's not enough the time for the big bill, but maybe on the short and long, what are some things that you would like to get done?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, I really want to tease out some of the new provisions in here, in which we're standing up a state public housing authority. We know that there's interest from our community, our local public housing authorities, to take advantage of this new funding opportunity that we do have in there for smaller communities with middle housing in a $50 million fund. Sometimes enacting good, new policy is often good. Sometimes focusing on implementation of what we just did is as important. And it's not that I'm tired or this or that and not ready for another fight. I just would like to take the temperature down where we can and when we can, so that we can actually focus on outcomes. because as a part-time legislature, I think it's particularly difficult for us to be as effective as we can be when we are a part-time legislature, knowing that our power and authority exists when we're in session, and when we're out, it's not. And then we all race back to our jobs. And so I just want to take the time to really focus on getting things right, and getting things off the ground so that we can really realize some of the outcomes we hope for in this bill.
It's a fair answer, especially the bigger and the more ambitious. Sometimes you got to just do a check on how things are actually going and make sure they're going the way they need to go. That's nothing wrong with that.
There's a lot of detail and kind of effective dates coming up very soon on this bill.
Yes.
It'll behoove all of us to stay focused on that and not forget about it. So.
Wise words. Something that, some of the advocates that I work with are going to be, especially a Partnership for Strong Communities, Senator MD and Rep. Eleni Cabros-Segraw helped us with a couple years ago. Tucked away in some of the reporting is going to be a report back from municipalities on the number of units approved and denied at the planning and zoning, and we should be seeing that data coming forward. So we're going to be personally looking forward to seeing that data come back from the towns and seeing how things are going in the local level, because a lot of the advocates, that I work with really do feel like a lot of this stuff is getting stalled in local P&Z, and we want to try to drill down and figure out why, which I know all of you are very much interested to know that too. So just an exciting thing coming out this year is going to be that we're going to actually see that data, and I'll let Eleni has a comment or question.
Just a quick comment on that. You probably saw that we passed last year the Inland Wetlands Commissioner training. We'd already had it for the chairs, but not for the whole commission. And part of that is making sure better decisions are made. And the one thing I didn't mention was trying to look at the planning and zoning training and to see, like, does that need to be updated? Because frankly, we want to make sure that our commissioners have enough information to make the best possible decisions, because that may be part of the challenge is they don't have the background knowledge. I mean, we can't expect everybody who volunteers for a commission to walk in with, voluminous knowledge of 830G or wetlands or whatever it might be. So I think that's another piece of that, but I can't wait to get that data back myself.
Very true. So I got one last question as kind of a lightning round to close us off, and I'm going to scatter it here. I'm going to let Senator MD go first, because I don't think I've asked him a question first yet. But there's not, the budgets are tight. We can, obviously different minds can agree on how much money the state does have available to spend, whether or not, guardrails aside, whatever. But let's just kind of go on a somewhat realistic boundary of like $10 million, and knowing that that's a little bit of a dream. Whoa, that was a big gust of wind. I got the sun shining on me on one side, and then I think the wind is trying to take my whole house up on the other. So let's just say you had $10 million, and I'm talking not bonding, appropriation. You had the ability to fund something at $10 million, Senator MD. What would, for housing related issues, what is something that you would like to see done if you had the ability?
Well, without any question, and obviously, I think the rental assistance, that's going to be a big one. If all the tenant is good, then not going to lead to homelessness. So if you said the $10 million, I would say majority goes to the rental assistance program, and rest for the homelessness. Taking care of the homelessness response team.
Good to hear. Senator Marks?
Yeah, thanks. So I'd be the same with rental assistance programs. And the other thing is we have some affordable housing developments, most of them like senior housing, that are coming near their end of their 40-year deed restrictions. And so I'm not sure that every municipality really looks into that and really knows, these could just stop having to be affordable as soon as that 40 years is up. So to put some money into that to help find some new developers to keep them at the 40, to keep them for another 40 years deed restricted. We need to use that. We have to help the lowest people on the income scale and the most needy. And so talk to all the smart advocates and they can tell me where we spend it all.
Representative Cabros-Segraw?
I was thinking actually creating a small loan fund because 10 million sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't like that significant an amount. So like as much as I'd love to put that towards sewer, that's like 10, I think it's like 10 miles of sewer. So if you put it towards a revolving loan fund that was targeting middle housing, that would probably be a better use of it because, I think that generally speaking, that's a little harder to access capital for, these smaller like triplexes, quadplexes, duplexes. So if you had a revolving fund, that would sort of boost people to do that in smaller communities, especially.
Antonio?
Okay, I have two answers. My first answer is I would take Jason's $10 million and Martha's $10 million and MD's $10 million and Eleni's $10 million and my $10 million and just fund the $50 million to the homelessness response system that the housing committee has passed a few times. I would do that. But I'll give a fun answer instead. What I would do is I would try to invest $10 million, and we'd probably be able to do it for cheaper on state property, to look at some of these communities that are looking to add new taxpayers, but not maybe not at the highest income brackets, and build transitional tiny homes for some of these folks who are maybe employed but experiencing homelessness, maybe aren't looking for the big family kind of deal, and creates somewhat of a transitional housing rent to own program where you build these tiny homes, allow them to go and live in these homes. They pay a certain amount of rent based on their income. That rent, a good portion of it will go into escrow, become their down payment, and they eventually will be able to, after a sustained period of keeping up with that rent, purchase the tiny home that they've been living in, creating new taxpayers while also providing housing for people who are coming off the streets.
Interesting idea. Representative Rojas?
What's the question now?
So
I was looking at the Q&A in the comments. Sorry.
Yeah, and we have a few minutes. I might try to sneak one of those in, but
Yeah.
$10 million of appropriations. If you had the ability to do whatever you wanted on the housing side to fulfill whatever need you thought was out there, what would you put it towards?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can disagree with, what my colleagues have already shared, right? I mean, there's a million and one things we could use to fund, use $10 million for. I think, the most important thing is actually getting a commitment of the funds. And then we can actually have a discussion about where to put it. But until we get to that point, and there's lots of reasons why we haven't been able to, right? It's not for lack of care or concern or interest, right? There are significant constraints we face in having to fund all of the important priorities that we have in state government. We're obviously setting in a housing conversation, and we all know what's needed there. But there are other areas across the state budget that also impact kind of people's ability to leave or core kind of needs that individuals have. So I'm not going to disagree with any folks here and not add one more to it. So
Sure. So I do see one. I have been keeping an eye on the chat, and a few of you have touched on the wraparound services for the housing of adults and folks with disabilities. But one question here about 8002, and I'm just going to be upfront with our audience. We do not have a representative from the executive branch here, but I will pitch this out to whoever has heard something about this. There's a question about how the staffing would be taken up in the executive branch to deal with some of the new responsibilities of 8002. I don't know if there was resources provided to deal with staffing. I'll take a hand if anybody wants to answer that question from Peter.
sorry, I was waving to somebody outside my window. Somebody else talk. I talked.
I was just going to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we provided for that in the budget and when we looked at this in the spring. So yes, that was a question actually that I think we got on the floor, and yes, that has already been provided for.
Yes, you did pass it in the budget, and thank you for clarifying that. With that, I don't see any other kind of questions that we didn't really get to. I do see some things, obviously, in the chat about things that folks would like the legislature to consider. Which,
Bill, are you looking at the Q&A or are you looking at the chat?
oh man, you're challenging me. Do you see it? Do you see something different, Antonio, that I didn't get?
I do.
Where's that Q? Oh, there it is. Sorry, there's two things.
You got it.
Can you add a little? I see one about a little more regarding the significance of the first-time home buyers program and the tax incentive for contributing employers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? That was one of the longest sections of the bill that probably got the least attention. And we were always quick to remind people 100-page bill, rah, right? But 20 pages were this home buyer account that nobody seemed to be particularly interested in, but is a really good, another important tool, right? To help individuals who want to buy a home and have, an employer or corporation pay a part in trying to get their employee a home. So creates a first time savings account where an individual will get a personal income tax deduction, and a tax credit will be given to a business who helps support that employment. That's really a nutshell explanation of a 20-page section of the bill.
And I see another here that's actually, pretty good about how our affordable housing policy is advancing inclusivity that support families staying together, even when a family member has a record. Antonio, I know this is something that's come up in the housing committee a few times. Is that something you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, I was actually at a legislative breakfast this morning talking about what we've been doing for the last couple of years, trying to pass a bill called Collateral Consequences of Criminal Record on Housing.
Hmm.
Obviously, if people have committed heinous, violent or sexually violent crimes, maybe you deserve as a landlord to know about that if you're putting them in a building with families and children and things like that. But for those other crimes, for those things that people have done maybe one time, right? Maybe you stole a car when you were 16, maybe you got into a bar fight, maybe you got caught on a possession charge of some sort. I don't think that it's a landlord's business to be looking into your record at that level and be denying you housing, especially if that charge had happened a good number of years ago. So what I know we will be bringing back up this year is trying to figure out how to bridge the gap between folks who have legitimate safety concerns for their communities and those people they're providing housing to, and those people who are coming out of incarceration that really need the extra help to make sure that they're back on their feet, because these are folks who sometimes will even have an easier time securing a job than securing housing based on their records. And with the housing market constrained the way that it is, we need to make it easier for folks to see when people are rehabilitated and ready to get back to living their regular daily lives. Because clean slate as it sits is a good policy, but waiting, 5-7 years, it's a long time. I just finished my 7th year in the legislature.
Thank you. Thank you for commenting on that. And with that, we're pretty close to time. I know there's some technical things that Don needs to do to switch people over to the next session. So I did want to kick it back to Danielle. So, but first of all, I wanted to thank everybody here on this call for all the remarkable work you guys have done and for giving us your hour this morning. It's very great to hear from you guys personally right after a big bill. And a reminder, everybody, that we have a part-time legislature here that splits their time between their duties in the House and in the Senate, and having a real-time job in their real lives. And so it's very hard to take some time after they've already spent so much time in the building. And my thanks to all of you for doing that and joining us today. And with that, I'll kick it back to Danielle.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, your commitment, and all the work you've been doing both in and outside of the regular session this year. I just wanted to remind folks, Chelsea just dropped in the chat that we have a brief 5-question survey. Please take a minute to respond to that. All of your feedback is so helpful to us. In addition, this is just a reminder that we are now entering a short break before we kick off the breakout sessions. So if you're planning to join us for some of the afternoon sessions, we will get started at 12:30. So please go enjoy your lunch. Thank your legislators. And we look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Thank you all for being here.